It is Monday, October 23rd, 2017, and this is the Monday Morning Analyst here on MMAfighting.com. My name is Luke Thomas. I am the host of this podcast, program, whatever you want to call it. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Three parts to the podcast. As always, we take a look at the action that happened over the weekend in an overview. We look at some stills in the second segment to go in depth. And in the third segment, we take a look at what's coming up in the week ahead. Two events from the weekend of note, although, of course, the combat sports world had many, many events worth paying attention to, including some shows. KSW 40 was a big show over the weekend, and there were many others as well. But the two we're going to pay attention to, Bellator 185, which took place Friday at the Mohegan Sun Arena in Uncasville, Connecticut. And then we're going to take a look at UFC Gdansk, or Gdansk, or however you properly pronounce it. Forgive me for not getting that right, which took place. What is the actual arena for that? Let's go ahead and get into it now. So that was UFC Fight Night 118, Cowboy versus Till. UFC Fight Night 118 was the number, of course, at the Ergo Arena, Cogito Ergo Sum Arena in either Gdansk or Gdansk, Poland, however you properly pronounce it. Had an attendance of 11,138 for a buy rate of 600, well, buy rate, it should be gate, 677,000. Not bad. Poland is a very hungry country for mixed martial arts. We had KSW, their major promoter, who was actually able to go to another European country and have what appeared to be a very successful show there, headlined by Mariusz Pudzianowski. And then UFC is able to go to Poland in their absence and hold a smaller show, but nevertheless one with some decent turnaround on it. So there you go. Okay, in the main event, in a welterweight contest, Darren Till defeats Donald Cerrone, the Cowboy, via TKO at 4:20 of the first round. I went back and watched this fight again this morning, even though I watched it live on Saturday. And by the way, if you want to check that out, you can see it. I believe it'll be over here on this side of the screen. I could be wrong about that, but just look up. You'll see the little information bubble. I did a post-fight special on my personal YouTube channel. So if you want some additional coverage of UFC Fight Night 118, UFC Fight Night Cerrone versus Till, you can check that out. Should be there, but it could be here. I'm not really sure. That out of the way, I went back and I watched this contest this morning. Man, what an impressive performance by Darren Till. You know, I noted in my post-fight special how important it was for Cowboy to give an opportunity to a guy like Till at 24 years old. It's very rare to be unranked and have a guy who's ranked put it on the line like that, especially not in his backyard, but certainly a little bit closer to home for him than it would be if they were in Las Vegas or something like that. And, you know, Cowboy's just one of those guys who really means it when he says anytime, anywhere, any place, and that can backfire on him sometimes. And it did here. But you really have to go and hand it to Till. I watched the fight again, as I mentioned this morning, and again or 2 days ago on Saturday. And what really sort of came away to me was just how initially I thought a lot of shots landed that didn't. He was very, very close. You could see Cerrone getting just out of the way of them. But he was able to find his range. He's really good about leaning back. You know, leaning back can be dangerous in a fight if you don't know how to really do it right, or you do it too much, or you know, it's your sole means of offense. But number one, he dodged a leg kick. There was a criticism I had, several leg kicks. There was criticism I had in some of his other fights where he was a little bit too willing to take a leg kick. He was a little bit more judicious with how many he took this time. And he's got really, really, really good sense of range, both coming and going. He gets just out of the way of strikes very, very often. It took him a second to find exactly where Cerrone was. Cerrone was just out of range for longer in the fight than I thought the first time watching it. But what you eventually see is he really starts to get cooking at about the third minute, where you see Cerrone ducking. He was ducking to his right every time to dodge and slip the punches, slip that left hand. He was slipping to the outside of it from Till, so Till started going to the uppercut. And once he started incorporating the uppercut, that was really what closed the show. It wasn't the uppercut itself, but now Cerrone knows that he's getting picked apart wherever he goes. Till has made a habit of, when he closes in range, throwing an elbow from the right side. He did that again here. I think he may have thrown one from the left as well, but he's really good about throwing that in-close elbow as he begins to close distance. And then he started throwing shots over the top with the left hand. He started, again, going just straight back 1-2. And even as Cerrone was exiting, he was still finding exactly where he had to put it all together. A left hand was the one that did the work. He has a very similar stance to Conor McGregor. He has a very similar vibe in some ways to Conor McGregor. Doesn't have quite the same, Ric Flair showmanship, but some of the parallels are there. Now, whether he's taking it from Conor or this is some kind of natural evolution or whether it's subconscious, I don't know. It's a matter of debate, but there does seem to be a fair bit of similarity there. So to me, this is a crazy good win for him. Still some questions about some of the other parts of his game. He is a strong starter, as we know. Not necessarily, as he has shown, a terrible finisher, but his skills tend to fade in a noticeable way over time. Can he address that going forward? So it's something to pay attention to. But man, what an incredible win for Darren Till. Big time moment for him. There's a concern about how many people saw it, given that it was on Fight Pass, but, you can't do much more with the opportunity than he did. Karolina Kowalkiewicz defeating Jodie Esquibel 30-27 across the board, then won 30-26. 30-26 seems a bit generous, but easy win for Double K here. Classic performance. She was getting connected on the right side from Esquibel as she began to close the distance, but it just looked like Kowalkiewicz wasn't fazed by the power, and so even though there was a real liability there, a liability somebody else might be able to exploit in the future, it just didn't really cost her in this particular contest. So she was able to march forward from there, devastating in the clinch, using her height advantage to pull down on the shorter opponent, less distance to go. You have a lot less work to do to have still devastating effect. And Esquibel, she has this bit where she can come in, she stays at range, she comes into range, she pops a shot, and then she's off at an exit, and she can do it a lot of different ways, and that's great, but it just is really hard to get any kind of accumulated damage doing that. You got to have a much more sustained attack to win at this level of mixed martial arts, and I just don't see, at least not in this fight, she didn't have that. Some of her Invicta fights, it's been a little bit more of that, but it's just not enough to win. You might land in those particular shots, but you're not doing a whole lot to confuse the person. You're not really doing a whole lot to hurt them. It gives them time and space to then recapture the fight. If she was backing Esquibel up, sometimes she would catch her no matter which way she was going at range with punches, elbows, clinch, and then she would, really fade out the end of the exit, a head kick on the way out. So she was tearing her up in those ways too. So, Esquibel's a talented fighter, but it just didn't look like in this particular contest there was a lot of firepower being really thrown or even attempted. Jan Blachowicz defeating Devin Clark at 3:02 of the second round via rear naked choke standing. There was some debate over how bad of a loss is this. I don't in any way say this intending to be derogatory or inflammatory. It's a bad way to win at this level. Is it the end of the world? No. Does it mean that Devin Clark can't come back from this? No. Does it mean that if they fought 10 times, Devin Clark wouldn't win at least 5, 6, maybe even 7 of them? No, it doesn't mean any of those things. But it does mean that on that day when they fought, it's a bad way to lose. It just is. The reason why you have body control with a rear naked choke is so that you can eliminate the avenues of escape. If you don't have any control of the body, their body can go and do a lot of different things. You saw that there's a lot of different ways to get around a rear naked choke. You can go step behind them, pick them up, and then drop them. They become surprisingly light when you do that because you're so easily under their hips. You can do the whole Gracie combatives thing where you sort of grip onto the arm in various different ways. If there's a gi, you can grip behind the, it's very common, you want to grip behind the shoulder and elbow. That brings the whole weight forward. It glues them to you a little bit, maybe creates a little space as well. You just throw them over the top of you. You can do there's a lot of different things you can do. The major problem I think he ran into was two things. One, it was the technical response that he had. To get choked like that really hard, it can be jarring. And if you, I'm sure that Devin Clark practices as hard as he absolutely can and as hard as he absolutely needs to. I just don't know a lot of gyms that incorporate scenarios like that. So I bet you it was just a function of surprise, to be honest. That most guys just don't attempt it, and he just got caught in that scenario. I mean, how many times in his gym do they practice the response to a standing rear naked choke? Probably not very often. They probably incorporate it as some function of what to do if they wrap their legs around you. And so in some ways, it's, wrapping your legs around someone technically makes the choke a little bit, or increases the odds of the choke happening. But at the same time, you're going to get a much more, muscle memory conditioned response because that's what guys train. So I think there's that. The other one was just from a technical standpoint, he went to the wrong side. You got to go to the same side as the choking arm to really get around that. But if they're not, if they're just choking you, and he wasn't even pulling him backwards either. He was just kind of like sucking him to him, and he had the arm like this, which makes it easier to grip. Not easy. I mean, I'm sure that choke was very, very tight. Don't get me wrong. Blachowicz is a big guy, but the point being is, probably doesn't train that a lot. Got surprised by it, and the other problem was he went to the wrong side. The side of the choking arm was the right side, which they were against the fence. So he would have had to just walk around a little bit, but he could have just dumped him right over his head. Could have dumped him right over his head. He would have gone over because there's nothing controlling Blachowicz, right? So if you can grab the arm and you can just suffer through the choke for just a bit, if you just literally just get your hips underneath theirs and throw them forward, they'll go right over. They'll go right over. But if you panic because it's surprising, even if you're a very tough, talented guy, which Devin Clark is, you're gonna lose. So that's what you saw there. Oscar, spelled Pichota, I think it's pronounced Pejota, defeated Jonathan Wilson 30-27 across the board. Just not enough offense from Wilson. A lot of sort of timidity. I mentioned on my post-fight special the body control that Pejota showed. Taking the back the way he did. You see a big guy like that sort of spider monkey his way into a position. That usually means they've got really good like grip, core strength, good balance, good mobility. You know what I mean? Like they're very flexible, that kind of thing. You don't need necessarily flexibility to do that. Just to have the very sort of minute details of your musculature be able to guide you around somebody like that at that size is very, very hard to do. And he did that. Beyond that, he looked pretty good. Don't have a lot to say about it, but solid performance from a guy who appears to be an up-and-coming talent at middleweight. Marcin Held getting the job done against Nasrat Haqparast, 30-27 across the board. Haqparast has some nice, explosive, accurate striking, but a real wrestling deficiency, which it took a second for Held to figure out he needed to exploit, but once he did, he basically had his way with him. Great job from, I mentioned this on my post-fight special as well. Held's got a lot of good work from half guard. He can sit there for a minute, he can change positions, he can put his base forward, he can put his base backward. He's got good passes from there, including same side knee cuts, opposite side knee cut to mount for a 3/4 mount. He's got good submissions there. He can set up from the arms, uses the arms to set up the pass. Like he's clearly pretty adept from that position. So I'd like to see him just keep working on the striking. There's no reason not to use it as much as you need to, but Held started off the UFC 0-3, and it was not because he was necessarily not doing the things he's good at. It was just partly bad luck, maybe some bad decisions. Taking the fight in Mexico City, didn't really do him any favors, but he is a talented guy. It's just if I was him, I would be really focusing on the things that he does well, even more, and then maintaining some of the striking stuff. Because the striking has come along, and that's great, but I'm not sure he was reasonably superior to Haqparast in this contest. In fact, I'm pretty sure he wasn't. How much time has he spent striking? Like it's just not. It's not a natural thing for him. Grappling really is, and so I would just I'm not saying a Demian Maia approach necessarily, but some kind of renewed emphasis. Brian Kelleher defeating Damian Stasiak at 3:34 of the third round via TKO. This one taking place for two reasons in my mind. Number one, Stasiak really good timing on his turning back kicks or spinning back kicks. He threw both hook kicks as well. Very adept at those, getting Kelleher as he was going side to side certain ways. Very adept at that. But Kelleher winning in my mind for two major reasons. The first of which, Stasiak is long for the weight class, but really has kind of a hunched over posture and looks down a lot. That made him open to uppercuts, knees, lots of different things. You could see Kelleher could hang on him, pull him, turn him, and it opened him up for a lot of stuff that he shouldn't have been so close to being open for. So, good presence of mind, by the way, from Kelleher to find those things, but Stasiak making it a little more available than he should. But really, the main one was what Kelleher was doing with his guillotine threat, and I mentioned this as well, the Louis Smolka fight against Ben Nguyen. And this is not just the only one, that's merely another one that comes to mind, but if you're really good with a guillotine setup, either you can jump guillotine or you can lock it up to threaten somebody and then force them to roll back down. You can really do a lot with it. And so I like that aspect. Plus, I like the fact that Kelleher, when he does jump guillotine, never sits in guard. He always sits and turns, so that if the guillotine fails, his hips are more closer to facing the mat than his opponents, which allows him to do better in a scramble. He always can find a way, or usually commonly can find a way to get on top. Yes, there might be a little more comfortability to the back, although that can vary. Some guys can be perfectly comfortable jumping to guard and then turning. But Kelleher understands for MMA purposes, if this fails, and these are tough guys, I need to have a backup plan no matter what. Or look, sometimes if you roll them, you can get an even tighter squeeze. You go back to Luke Rockhold and Michael Bisping, one-armed guillotine with one hand posted on the mat. You can do that way too. It's not that one's weaker than the other, but just there's a comfortability factor there for a lot of guys. So I just really like how Kelleher has a nice little twist at the end of his guillotine, just to make sure, probably puts additional pressure, but just to make sure that if the guy escapes, you're in a better position to scramble and get back to a more neutral or even advantageous position. Great job by Boom. Ramazan Emeev defeating Sam Alvey 30-27 across the board. Absolutely god-awful fight. Not that these guys don't have ability, but they didn't show necessarily a whole lot of it in this contest. Sam Alvey trying to cut an enormous amount of weight, and it dramatically impacted his game. Wasn't really to get anything going. Was hit a lot more in this contest than I remember him being hit in a lot of previous contests. And, Emeev is the rightful winner, but not a great fight. Andre Fili defeating Artem Lobov 30-27 across the board. This was interesting when I went back and watched this one again this morning just to see if I remembered what I remembered. And what I saw from this one was the striking was a little bit more even than I thought it was. Yes, at least in the first round. Yes, Lobov was bleeding from that, I believe, left eye. And it wasn't like Fili wasn't getting the better of him in the first round. He was. But there was a couple more shots that landed by Lobov that I hadn't realized. It was interesting. Once you can actually hear it right around the 1 minute mark. You can hear, I believe, his corner, which in this case was Danny Castillo. I believe you can hear Danny Castillo scream at him. You can hear it on the broadcast. He's open for the head kick. He's open for the head kick. And then maybe, I don't know, 20 seconds later or however much longer it was, he throws it and connects him. And if you notice, he was constantly on the march, and he would, as Lobov was coming at him, he would do the Dominic Cruz, change off at an angle, or like Groovy Lando would throw a shot like a dart on an angle. He did a little bit of that. It was actually when he got his hand up and he got Lobov to pause just for a second his own forward progression, and then that's when he lit him up with a head kick because he has his hands down and or out in front of him or something. And he was testing it the whole time. And Lobov too. Lobov was giving it back to him with good body kicks as well. So they were going to all three. He was going legs, body, head. But you could just tell if you could just time it right, get your hands out in front of him, get him away from his face, get that instinct to not be there, and then once you do that, throw it, landed it. It was good. From there, he was able to win on wrestling. Lobov actually has decent takedown defense, but Fili has actually, to me, the biggest improvement in Fili's game was, listening to his corner is great, but the takedown looked good. Nice timing on him. Thorough blast doubles, turning the corner when he needed to. Nice job from him. Artem Lobov seemed to indicate that retirement was a possibility. I guess we'll have to see. Varley Alves using wrestling to beat Salim Touhari, 30-27, 2-29-28. Big takeaway for me from that is not a whole lot learned about Alves, other than if he needs to pace himself, he can go the distance. But, we're talking about a guy, I think, in Touhari who came in on relatively short notice. So not a lot to take from that one. However, Aspen Ladd at bantamweight defeating Lena Landsberg, 2:23 the second round. Boy, Landsberg was tearing her up in that first round with body shots from the knees and the clinch, and doing it from a lot of different positions, changing angles, throwing it straight up, coming around the corner, sort of slashing to the side as well. These were hard shots right on the solar plexus, right on the ribs, right in that diaphragm area, right in the middle. She was crushing her. And I was actually kind of impressed because I thought, Ladd's better than this. But maybe I underestimated Landsberg. It's very, very possible. And I think in a sense I did. But then Ladd sat down. Whoever her cornermen are did a great job. Gave her clear, urgent, but not frantic instructions. She listened to them. She goes out there. She executes on the takedown. She gets it. Passes easily, moves to mount, and then just proceeds to sort of let instinct take over and wallops her. Stoppage might have been a little bit early, but just a great job by a developing fighter in Ladd, listening to the corner, not panicking, making adjustments after a very tough first round. Like, not a horrible first round, but not a good one by any stretch of the imagination. And so shouts to Aspen Ladd for doing a great job, and shouts to her cornerman as well. It's like, that's exactly the kind of instructions that a fighter like that, I mean, every fighter's different, but it just feels to me like urgent but not frantic, and that's hard to know exactly how to get where you need to be with that, and they seem to do it effortlessly. So great job to them. And then Josh Emmett defeating Felipe Aranches, 30-26 across the board, 130-25. That seems a bit much. 30-26, I'm a little bit more on board with, but Nevertheless, dropping him 4 times in the first round, big power, great combinations. Josh Emmett's one of these guys who doesn't make a ton of noise outside of the octagon. I don't think a lot of people realize how good he is, dropping down to featherweight and then showing this new punching power off. But man, he's switching stances and combination against the fence, good accuracy, good defense as well. Wasn't getting hit a lot himself. Good management of range. You could have argued that fight could have been stopped in the first round, to be honest, because if a guy's getting beat like that, you need to save him from additional punishment. And that fight was, the fate was basically sealed. We all love big comebacks. I'm not saying I'm upset at the ref for not stopping it. I'm just saying if he had stopped it, I wouldn't have cried too much about it, to be honest. Saving Aranches a beating that he didn't really need, which is what he ended up getting here. Be curious to see more from Josh Emmett. A little bit longer in the tooth. Let me see how old Emmett is. I don't believe he is that young. 32. So he's got some work to do to make use of what's left of his athleticism. And he does have plenty left, but clock's ticking a little bit. So be curious to see what he's got. Your fight of the night went to Brian Kelleher versus Damian Stasiak. And then performance of the night went to Darren Till and Jan Blachowicz. So, that's that. That brings us now to Bellator 185. Not going to go through hardly all of these, but it's worth discussing. As I mentioned, this was supposed to take... This card was decimated by injuries. Brendan Ward was supposed to be on this versus David Rickles, so that got torn apart. Muhammad The Wall was supposed to be facing Liam McGeary. Neiman Gracie's opponent changed at the last minute to a guy named Zach Busia, who everyone thought was me. My Twitter timeline on Friday night was... open mic night, everyone comparing this gentleman to me. In any case, don't have any numbers on attendance or gate, as is common with Bellator. But in the main event, Gegard Mousasi defeating Alexander Shlemenko. Barely, boy. 29-28 across the board. I had it Shlemenko winning, to be honest. Thought he lost the first round. Thought he did enough in the second round. I thought he easily took the third. So maybe that second round is your swing round. I wouldn't call it a robbery. Again, when they get close like this, the scoring criteria makes it so that it is argumentatively possible to arrive at a rational place for either fighter, which means the scoring criteria is dog-s, but that's the one that we have. So it's not a robbery by any stretch of the imagination, but it is close. It was tightly contested. You would have to think that if this fight had gone 3 rounds, it probably would have favored Shlemenko. And again, if you have Mousasi winning, I wouldn't argue too much with that. Like I said, personally, I had Shlemenko winning, but Shlemenko closing his right eye, I believe, from his left side early in the contest. Looks like he has a broken orbital. I'm surprised they didn't stop it after the first, to be honest, or after the second, when it was clear he couldn't see, but probably was lying, which is, fighters do when the doctors say, hey, can you see? Yeah, of course I can see. They can't see a thing. And he gutted it out with his wrestling, but man, barely. It's a big question about what it means for these UFC fighters to come over here to Bellator. We had the same problem with Strikeforce. We have it now. It is not that Bellator has divisions as stacked as the UFC. It literally doesn't even have the same amount of divisions, much less as stacked. So no, they're not nearly as stacked, but the top guys in those divisions are not to be trifled with at Bellator. They're not, again, not necessarily as good as the very best, nor are they as thick, but they've got talented dudes over there who can do a lot, and you see that here. Even if this was somewhat flukish, even by crazy Shlemenko standards, stuff like this happens in fights, and Mousasi had to dig deep, which he did. He had to dig deep, but that was a very, very, very close call. We'll see what happens next with Gegard Mousasi and Shlemenko. They might do a rematch with that one. Neiman Gracie defeating my lookalike, apparently. Zach Busia, neck crank. Couldn't quite get the rear naked choke, so when he turned over, a lot of times guys will turn away for a choke so that they can't be choked, but what that means is the guy can switch if they want, or there's all different kinds of cranks, or they can stay in the same way and say, look, I can't get under the throat, but the guy's giving me a kind of a turn. If I can pinch it in and pull, right, so you're getting yanked back, and you're getting turned and pinched in at the same time, it can be rather devastating. So you want to turn the guy's head, where's your head not supposed to go? You can go this far, but it's not really supposed to go beyond that, although I have terrible neck mobility. So take it that way and then pinch it in a little bit as well, and you can get some really bad pain violence from that. Okay, this was the big one. Kristina Williams defeating Heather Hardy at 2 minutes of the second round. We're going to take a look at that in the second segment. what can you say about this one? We'll go over this more in detail, but commentator Jimmy Smith was right. You got to kickbox a boxer, which is exactly what she did. There were a lot of tendencies that Heather Hardy had that her team must have game planned for perfectly. Because when you watch this fight from the outset, Kristina Williams does everything, not everything correct, but there's such a clear case that they prepped specifically for her weaknesses and they executed perfectly. Like what they thought what her weaknesses were and what they thought the solutions for that was and how Williams executed it is really good, especially for a pro debut. Bro, your pro debut, I've seen a lot of pro debuts. They look like a lot of donkery. Very little donkery from Kristina Williams. It's inevitable as a pro debut. You're going to have some, but she did a very good job. Really good job. We'll talk about more about that in the second segment. Ryan Quinn defeating Marcus Sorin, 29-28 across the board. No big deal here. And then women's flyweight, Lisa Blaine defeating Anna Hulaton. Split decision, 29-28, 28-29, 29-28. I kind of saw it the other way, but again, can't really argue with it. It was a bad fight. The first fight in women's flyweight between Williams and Hardy was not a bad fight. But the fight between Blaine and Hulaton was really bad. There was just a lot of moments there where Hulaton had at one time, I think in the second or third round, a takedown reversal that never should have happened. There was all these opportunities and scrambles to take him out that were just wide open. The striking was inexact and seemed rudderless at times, even from Hulaton, which was kind of surprising. I mean, you're getting your feet wet, I suppose, is to be expected in MMA, but it was not a strong performance, and you can't make a strong claim, unlike Shlemenko. I don't think you can make a super strong claim that Hulaton deserved to win that contest. It ruins things a little bit for Bellator, although I suppose they can still make a Hardy-Hulaton fight, but yeah, your winners there, Lisa Blaine and Kristina Williams. Kristina Williams of the two stands out to me as the one that's got some real potential. So there you go. Okay, let's do this. Let's go to the second segment, and let's take a look at what Kristina Williams did against Heather Hardy. Yes, she kicked her in the face. Everybody knows that. But there's a little bit more to the story. Let's look at that now. One of the things I like doing with the Monday Morning Analyst is that oftentimes when there's a result that looks a certain way, I treat it like an autopsy. Like, how did we get here? Is this really the first way this strike was thrown that got us to a position where something like this happened? Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes that, you know, it's a last-minute innovation. It's something thrown, not wildly lit necessarily, but not part of a larger sequence of things that you can point to. That's not the case here. Here, that crushing shot that landed across the face of Hardy was set up a number of times, and in fact had landed a number of times for a number of reasons. The first is that, you know, she was essentially disguising it as with a punch, either a jab or a cross, depending if she was throwing with the front or the rear leg. But it looked like what happened was she would throw the punch and then Hardy would slip to the outside of it. Hardy did a lot of ducking to one side or another. If she threw with her left, she would duck to her right, which makes a lot of sense. You don't duck into your punch, you duck in the same direction as the punch is going. And so if she threw a right, she would duck to her left. And Kristina Williams would counter that by faking the jab, throwing across, getting Hardy to slip, and then putting the kick right behind it. She did this a number of times, but more than that, she was just chin-checking Hardy all the time. At the end of a clinch break, Hardy's hands come down a little bit. She would check her by throwing a kick every single time there was a clinch break. When they were standing at range, she was throwing push kicks, roundhouse kicks. She was throwing back leg teeps, front leg teeps, like all different kinds of stuff to maintain range, to check where her hands were at, and just so as Jimmy Smith had correctly noted, kickbox a boxer, put her in situations where she won't be able to compete with you, and we can exploit some specific deficiencies. So in other words, make the game a game that she can't play as well, and then individually, more minutely, pinpoint some of the things she does wrong. They did both of those. So we're going to go through a few of these here, show you exactly what we're talking about. At 4:57, you're going to see her, watch her, I believe, kick at the end of a sequence as she backs out here. So you can see her switch stances. Williams throws a jab, kind of backing up a little bit, gets leg kicked here. You can see Hardy charging. Then they're just kind of brawling here a little bit, but watch. As soon as she gets at the end of a combo, throws it, and just, you can see, just narrowly misses there. But just watch it one more time. At the end of any kind of clinch break, this is what she's doing. Whoop. Every time as she circles out. Let's take a look at another example. Let's take a look here and see what happens. All right. Move around, kind of a push kick here. Hardy circles around. Both fighters standing orthodox. Let's see when she jabs, crosses, jabs again, throws up the top. You see that. Now she gets countered this time, but you can see exactly what the game plan is. Put the punch in, disguise it right behind. This time she gets countered over the top by Hardy. And it's kind of hard to tell if she went to the body exactly or if she went to the head, and it just sort of landed there. But you can see at the end of every combo, throwing that. Every time. Every time she exits that range, she's throwing here, and she's putting punches. And it takes a second to get, you know, these activities working, these strategies working. But she throws it, boom. There we go. All right, let's jump to the forward in the fight. All right, here you see Heather Hardy kicking her. Boom. They're going to brawl a little bit here. They both exchange on crosses. Hardy does a good job of countering that overhand right early in the contest. You can see there. They kind of clinch up a little bit. Williams turns into her. Hardy pushes off. Now watch this. Puts the punch. Steps in. Boom. Checks her again. And look what Hardy is doing every time. When she throws that left, dipping to her right. See that? And then look at Williams. This is everything right here. This is everything right here. Catching with the left, pushing off with the left. She's going to put that right behind it, leaning into it off the opposite side of the punch, but where the punch is essentially going. Just doesn't quite land effectively as she wants it to. But you can see already a minute and 15 into the fight, they've game planned correctly, and she's knocking on the door. Let's look here. They're circling out. Here they come. Let's see what Williams does. All right, kind of dips. Sort of stutter steps here a little bit. Walking her down. Let's see what happens. Boom. What does that look like? Sees her coming. Look at this. And they're both, she's kind of anticipating it. You can see Williams kind of throws the jab. You can see the weight change, right? She's looking, look at Hardy. Steps. And so they're both kind of stepping at the same time here, but she can tell she's going to step off at an angle, fake the jab, flick it out, and then throw the right behind it, thinking she's slipping to the outside. She's going to land this, but instead she's just going to lean into that, right? They just know she's going to go that direction. She's going to slip to the outside. She likes to lean like that every time. They can just kind of walk into it and force it. Boom, boom, bang, every time. This happened a number of times in the first round, somewhat to devastating effect, somewhat not. But not great. Catches her every time. Let's jump a little further in the fight. Here we go. They're circling against the fence. Let's see what happens here. She's going to step. She's going to step wide, throwing this inside kick so she can probably close range. Lets her get... Because it wasn't just that Williams was high kicking on the outside. As I mentioned before, she was doing a lot of front kicks. A ton of front kicks. So what happened was you saw Hardy reach further and further and further and further away to try and land something. So here she is trying to use this sort of instep kick as a way to step into range to come over the top. What do you see Williams do? Point out, measure, knowing Hardy's going to be to the outside of that because that's the way she leans. Boom. This time catches in the body, not the head. Same kind of attack. You can see what's happening here. They're catching her on her tendencies. They know if one punch is coming, her head is going to be way to the outside of the same direction. So move in that direction, slip on yourself on the outside, measure with your hand. All right, pretty good. Let's keep jumping. As I mentioned before, on all the clinch breaks, what does she do? She's going to make sure you keep your hands up as you get away. Whoop, boom. Every time she did this, man. Never missed a beat. Never missed an assignment. Boom. Hands down, chin checking. Every single time on a clinch break. So many people keep their hands down on a clinch break. Right? And using your kickboxing experience and your length to take advantage of that. Smart stuff by Kristina Williams. Okay, here they're tied up and they're kind of brawling. Williams did this a lot. She would have one hand on the back, typically the left, and she was just jamming elbows on this side. I'm not sure if that's just where she's more comfortable, if they saw something from that side, but you see a lot of that. So let's watch this. So she's jamming elbows over the top, trying to hurt her. Pushing back, stepping to the outside, jamming her again. Now watch, she's going to step, throw the hand. Where's Hardy naturally ducking? Right into it. You saw this kick play out a number of times every time. She thinks she's slipping to the outside of a right hand, right? Watch. Boom. She's looking, sees the right hand getting cocked, or the right hand getting cocked. She thinks that this is just some kind of jab she's ducking because maybe Williams wants to throw the left, but she's just setting her up for that every time. Kaboom. That is, by the way, the beginning of the end here. I think this is the shot that bloodies her nose, if I'm not mistaken. Look at this. Pow, son. Catches her every time. Puts this hand out, she ducks to the outside of it, and puts the kick behind it. Every time. It's amazing. Okay, one more time. Here they are standing at distance, towards the end of the first round. Like you see, Williams and Williams, by the way, not putting the punch out in front of it, just kind of sort of feinting with the leg here, by the way. Keeping that nice and tightly camouflaged, or at least creating some confusion. She turns her hip over. Look, she turns her hip over, thinking she's out of stance. Hardy tries to get the angle. Williams comes back and just throws the other leg, keeps her honest, which essentially nullifies the attack of Hardy. Pretty good job by that. Nice, just great kicking dexterity, great balance, great ability, great awareness. Just strong stuff for a pro debut. All right, let's jump to the second round because you basically have seen everything you need to get what's happening here. Okay, here they are facing off in the second round. This is just one of those things where you're just sort of checking someone's defense. Look at Hardy's rear hand here, right? Not in a great place. She kind of throws it here, steps in. You can see, by the way, look at how heavy she is on that front leg leaning. But Williams doesn't react. Here's what she does do, right? I'm just going to come in and check. It looks like she sets up and then Hardy reacts to it, but she's just sort of checking that hand back there. Now, luckily, even though she was leaning kind of into it a little bit, because remember, if she's throwing with this one, she's going to drop her head. I don't think Williams knew that was going to happen directly, although maybe she did. Maybe she thought, Hardy likes to go side to side. The last punch was from the right. Maybe this one will be from the left. Could be. But I think it's more just sort of checking that rear hand placement. But let's jump to where really the action gets very, very bad. Okay, you've seen this a million times. You've seen it already in this fight. You saw it on Friday night. It's the exact same thing we've been looking at. You see her coming in, right? Gauging her, stutter stepping, seeing what she'll do, right? Throws that back leg teep, kind of misses here a little bit and almost eats a punch, reacts to it. Here she comes. Look at that hand. Look at the lead hand. Look at Williams' lead hand. In this case, she's facing like a southpaw. So this hand's kind of down. It's this hand that gets thrown as a punch, or faked as a punch, I should say, and Hardy slips to the outside, which allows that. Let's watch that a little more forcefully. It's kind of reactive how she's doing this, right? But fakes it, boom, puts the kick right behind it, and Hardy eats it clean. And after that, it just got ugly, and you can see Williams follows up on it here. Take a look at that one more time. It's the same thing she'd been doing the entire fight. Now, she did it from a sort of a different stance here because she was switched into like a southpaw stance, but it didn't really matter. She has the kind, we saw earlier in the fight, she has the kind of dexterity to land things like that. She misses the teep, right? Sees an opening, fakes the punch, just knew Hardy would slip to the outside of it and then caught her right behind it. Pretty great job in terms of a pro debut. Pretty good job, really, by any kind of measurement by Kristina Williams. I take my hat off to her. Great job. And last but not least, let's take a look at what's coming up in the week ahead. It is UFC events for as far as the eye can see from here on out through the rest of the year with, I think, one, maybe two exceptions, if that. Certainly Christmas, I think you have off. Other than that, I think it's UFC City. So next week, UFC Fight Night 119... or the return of Lyoto Machida when he faces Derek Brunson in the main event. This will be at the Ginásio do Ibirapuera. I'm sure that's very good Portuguese. In Sao Paulo, Brazil. This card is actually pretty excellent. Derek Brunson, as I mentioned, takes on Lyoto Machida in the main event. Demian Maia will face Colby Covington. Pedro Munoz faces Rob Font. Francisco Trinaldo, Massaranduba takes on Jim Miller. All of those fights are good. Thiago Santos faces one of the best European prospects in my mind, Jack Hermanson. John Lineker versus Chito Marlon Vera, who's on a 3-fight win streak himself. Then you drop down to the Fox Sports 2 preliminary card. The main card will be on Fox Sports 1. Vicente Luque taking on Nico Price. Shoeface is back, taking on Jack Marshman. Hakran Diaz versus Jared Gordon. Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos taking on Max Griffin. Then on Fight Pass, Davison Figueiredo, I'm sure that's not correct, versus Jared Brooks. And then Christian Colombo versus Marcelo Golm. There you go. All right. Appreciate you guys watching. If I missed anything, email me, lukethomasnews@gmail.com. You can see him also at Luke Thomas News for Facebook and Instagram as well. Always appreciate a follow. Thank you guys so much. Subscribe to MMA Fighting, the YouTube channel. Like this video. Share it around. Until next time, boys and gals, enjoy the fights.